You ever look at someone you love, really look, and realize they've already left the room months ago? Not physically. Oh no, they're still there, making coffee, humming to a song they used to hate, asking about your day with the same voice they use when ordering a sandwich. But something's off. Their laughter's a little too light. Their phone a little too tilted. Their hugs feel like you're hugging someone who's already packing. I didn't catch it at first. You never do. That's the trick with betrayal. It doesn't kick down the door. It cracks the window and waits. My name's Cal. I was married for 22 years. Had the house, the dog, the wife who made roasted duck on random Tuesdays like we were still dating. And then one night, she asked me, "Do you remember a guy named Simon?" That's how it started. With a name, a smile, and a dinner invitation that would change everything. By the end of it, I wouldn't just uncover an affair. I'd design a revenge so silent, so complete, she didn't even realize she'd lost until the door clicked shut behind me. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about clarity, about walking away without slamming the door, about what happens when the quiet guy stops playing dumb and starts paying attention. Let me tell you what really happened. You ever have one of those nights where everything feels just a little too perfect? The wine's already breathing on the counter. Your wife's humming that one sad song she only plays when she's in a good mood. Candlelight flickering like you're about to propose all over again, not just eat reheated lasagna. Even the dog's behaving. That was Tuesday. I came home from work late, a client crisis, the usual, and when I walked through the door, I smelled garlic, lemon zest, and anticipation. And I should have known right then that something was off. Because my wife, Lydia, hated cooking anything that required zesting. Said it made her wrists ache. But there she was, in a dress I hadn't seen in years, the one with the deep green neckline and sleeves like ivy wrapping her arms. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, smiling like we were in a toothpaste commercial. "Did I forget an anniversary?" I asked, hanging up my coat. She laughed. "You're always forgetting something." Which, now that I think about it, wasn't an answer, just a deflection in heels. Anyway, I didn't push. I set the table, poured the wine, and tried to shake off that low buzz in my gut. The one that whispers, "Hey, buddy, brace yourself." Dinner was amazing. She even let me ramble about work, which she usually zones out of by the third sentence. And just when I was starting to think maybe things were getting better between us, she tilted her head and said, "Do you remember a guy named Simon?" I blinked, fork halfway to my mouth. Simon. Simon Gaines. We went to college with him. And there it was. That name. Like someone had slipped a match under the edge of my tablecloth and was waiting to see if I'd noticed the smoke. Vaguely, I said, "Didn't he drop out after sophomore year? Something about a backpacking trip and a near-death experience in Thailand?" She nodded, but too fast. "Yeah, that's him." I set my fork down. "Why are we talking about Simon Gaines?" Lydia looked at me, really looked at me. Then she said the kind of sentence that changes the temperature in a room. "He's back in town." We ran into each other. "Oh yeah," I said, already feeling my knuckles tighten. "And what did you two talk about?" Her smile thinned. "We just caught up." I stared at her, trying to read between the syllables. Caught up is one of those phrases that deserves its own warning label. Then she added, too casually, "I invited him to dinner on Friday." I swear to you, I actually laughed. Thought it was a joke. "You invited your old, almost boyfriend to dinner." Here. She sipped her wine. "He's just a friend, Cal." And I wanted to believe that. God, I did. I wanted to chalk it all up to a weird coincidence, to old friends reconnecting over lemon zest chicken. But something in her voice was off. Too soft. Too rehearsed. Like she'd practiced that line a few times in the mirror already. "Just a friend," I repeated, setting my glass down harder than I meant to. The stem cracked. Just a thin little fracture running down the side. Looking back, I think that glass was the first thing to break. That night I couldn't sleep. Lydia was snoring lightly beside me, face calm, hand curled into the blanket like a kid dreaming about summer camp. Meanwhile, I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, counting rotations like maybe I'd find some pattern in them that explained what was happening to my marriage. I knew the name Simon Gaines, all right. Not just from college. He wasn't just some footnote in our shared history. He was the guy who used to send Lydia mixed CDs titled things like Mornings Without You and Soundtrack to a Heartache. Back then, I figured he was just a phase, a tragic haircut and a moody playlist. But now? Now he had a jawline shaped by adult stress and enough money to wear loafers without socks. Friday came quicker than I liked. I spent most of that afternoon wandering from room to room like I was checking for invisible leaks. I fluffed pillows. I vacuumed rugs I didn't even like. At one point, I rewired the living room lamp for no reason other than needing something to fix. At 6:53 p.m., the doorbell rang. 3 minutes early. Of course, he would be early. Lydia opened the door like she'd been practicing. Her voice jumped an octave. Simon. There he was. Tan. Confident. That special kind of confident that comes from never really failing at anything that matters. He wore a blazer with jeans, rich guy casual. I shook his hand. Too firmly. He smiled like he noticed. Cal, right? Man, it's been forever. Not long enough, I muttered, then fake coughed like I was clearing my throat. Dinner was a minefield. Lydia served roasted duck. She doesn't even like duck. But apparently Simon did, because he made a comment about how perfectly the fat rendered, and Lydia giggled like he just invented humor. I kept watching their body language. I've read enough psychology blogs to know the signs. Feet pointed toward each other. Mirrored movements. Shared eye contact that lasted a fraction too long. Simon launched into some story about his humanitarian startup that's helping build wells in Madagascar. Great. Not only was he handsome and successful, he was also hydrating Africa. I asked him what happened to the web design company he used to run. His fork paused midair. Oh, that, he said, chuckling. Sold it. Got bored. Lydia beamed. Isn't he amazing? And that was it. My wife, looked at another man across our table and said those 3 words with stars in her voice. After dessert, Simon stood to leave. I extended my hand again. He pulled me into a hug. A hug. I smelled patchouli and polished ego. Great catching up, Cal, he said, patting my back like I was the underdog in a boxing match. When he left, the silence between me and Lydia wasn't awkward. It was clinical, like a surgery that went long and didn't save the patient. I turned to her. So when exactly did he get back in town? She froze, mid-reach for a wine glass. A few weeks ago, she said finally. But I didn't think it was a big deal. Right, I nodded. That's why you made duck. The man's favorite meat. She looked down at the counter. You're being paranoid. And I might have believed that, if I hadn't seen her phone light up an hour later. Simon, I meant every word. You looked beautiful. She didn't notice I saw it. But I did. The next morning, Lydia was whistling. Now, my wife is a lot of things, organized, strategic, the kind of woman who color codes the closet and meal preps for 3 weeks at a time, but whistling isn't one of them. So, yeah, something was off. Again. She breezed through the kitchen in yoga pants, kissed my cheek like we were living in a detergent commercial, and said she was heading to a Pilates and journaling workshop. That's not even a thing. It sounds like a cult for flexible people who overshare. Once she left, I stood in the middle of the living room, hands on hips like a suburban Batman, and did what every man on the brink of unraveling does. I opened her laptop. Now before you roll your eyes, no. I'm not proud of it. I didn't want to be that guy. But the truth is, when you stop trusting someone, every locked screen feels like it's hiding a confession. I tapped her password on the first try. She always used the name of her first dog and the year she graduated. Sentimental. Predictable. Kind of like me, apparently. Her email inbox was clean. Suspiciously clean. No unread messages. Just a few threads from coworkers and one email from a boutique called La Petite Escape. I clicked. Thank you for booking your private couples massage with Simon Gaines. We look forward to seeing you Saturday at 3:30 p.m. There it was. Not Pilates. Not journaling. A spa. With Simon. I stared at the screen like it might burst into flames. She was using my internet to schedule her betrayal. And still, I didn't say anything. Not right away. Because something weird happens when your world starts to crack. You start negotiating with your own dignity. Maybe it's just a massage. Maybe she felt guilty and invited him before thinking it through. Maybe I'm overreacting and I'll end up apologizing while she gets custody of the moral high ground. But deep down, I knew. You see, there's a difference between doubt and instinct. Doubt asks questions. Instinct makes statements. And mine was screaming, this isn't new. This isn't accidental. This is a pattern. I scrolled further. Found an old message from Simon titled Paris. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a photo. Lydia, wearing a white summer dress I'd never seen before. She was standing on a balcony, smiling toward the camera like she didn't have a single obligation in the world. The date stamp was from 7 months ago. She told me she'd gone to Phoenix for a regional retreat. I even watered her plants while she was off sipping Bordeaux with a backup boyfriend in the land of croissants and cliches. I closed the laptop slowly, not out of calm, but because I didn't want to break it before I figured out how to use it. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was just collecting pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. And when I finally finished it, when I had all the pieces, oh, I wouldn't scream. I'd build something out of them. Something permanent. I didn't confront her. Not yet. No, I did what any man with a bruised heart and a functioning brain does. I started planning. See, rage makes people stupid. But patience? Patience builds empires. Or in my case, a quiet, calculated little demolition crew. That week, I began rehearsing smiles. I kissed her good morning. I asked about her workshops. I complimented her hair even when I knew Simon's fingers had probably been in it the day before. She thought I was healing. I was taking notes. I took my lunches in the car, parked behind the hardware store across from her office. I'm not proud of it, but that's where I first saw it. Her. Him. Getting into his Audi. Her laugh bouncing off the concrete like it belonged to someone I didn't know anymore. That laugh used to be mine. I went back home that afternoon and dug into the bottom drawer of my desk, the drawer with all the old receipts and warranty cards no one ever throws out. Somewhere under a user manual for a toaster I no longer owned, I found what I was looking for, the spare key to the storage unit we never talked about. Unit 119. The one Lydia said we used to keep seasonal stuff. And by seasonal, I guess she meant her second life. The unit was in the far corner of the lot, past rows of rusting padlocks and dented doors. It smelled like mothballs and old decisions. When I pulled the metal door open, the fluorescent light flickered like even it was hesitant to illuminate the truth. Inside, 2 suitcases. One male, one female. A box of Paris brochures, wine corks, and a folded map with a red circle around a hotel I'd never heard of. My name wasn't on a single scrap of it. It was like I'd been written out of my own story and replaced with Simon's jawline and vintage passport stamps. At the very bottom of a shoebox was a handwritten note in Lydia's curling script. Love shouldn't feel like duty. With you, it doesn't. L. That's when I felt it. Not heartbreak, not fury, clarity. Cold, clean, focused clarity. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment. This wasn't a one-time thing or a fling that fizzled. No, this was infrastructure. This was scaffolding built on my blind spots. And maybe that would have been the end of it for most men. Maybe they'd leave, arms full of betrayal and a half-empty suitcase. Maybe they'd cry into a drink and call it healing. But not me. I went home and poured us a glass of wine, sat on the couch with her, arm around her shoulders, pretending I didn't know her perfume had changed. When she asked how my day was, I smiled and said, productive. I waited another week, just long enough to let her get comfortable. Then I set things in motion. First, passwords. Lydia always used variations of our anniversary and the word lavender. Her favorite scent. I logged into her cloud storage. Found photos she never meant for me to see. Some were obvious: kisses, hotel rooms, candlelit dinners with timestamps that made me laugh out loud. But others? More telling. Scans of legal documents. A draft of a lease, my name absent. An email chain about selling our cabin quietly and without disruption. She was planning her exit, which meant she thought she still had time. Second, money. I'd handled the finances for most of our marriage, a fact she seemed to have forgotten. I knew which accounts were joint, which ones she'd stashed money into from her side gigs, and how often she forgot to change her login credentials. Over the next few days, I began a quiet little withdrawal. Not money information. Bank statements. Transcripts. Emails. Even her location history. Every breadcrumb she dropped, I swept into a folder I labeled vacation photos. Next, people. Simon worked at a boutique marketing firm. His assistant, a guy named Derek, was much more talkative after 2 beers and a story about my wife cheating with his boss. Derek confirmed everything. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. She visited his office weekly. They took lunch in the conference room with the blinds drawn. Once, Derek walked in and saw Simon adjusting his belt. He called it a tight waistline problem, Derek said. I call it workplace misconduct. I nodded, handed him a 50 for his discretion, and thanked him for the clarity. Now, here's where the story pivots. Because I know what you're thinking. What now? Blow it all up? Confront her in a dramatic finale? Tempting. But I had something better in mind. Revenge isn't about explosions. It's about precision. I booked a table at Le Jardin, the same place we had our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Romantic, expensive, memorable. I told Lydia I wanted to rekindle the spark. She lit up like I'd handed her a Hallmark card dipped in forgiveness. Of course, she said. That sounds perfect. I even let her pick the dress. The night of the dinner, she looked radiant. I wore the tie she always said brought out my eyes. We toasted with champagne. We ordered duck. Halfway through the meal, I handed her a small box. She gasped. What's this? Open it. Inside was a single hotel room key. She stared, brows knitting. What's this for? I smiled. Room 714. You'll recognize it. I had the staff recreate the Paris layout. The view, the flowers, even the same wine you had with Simon. You didn't think I knew. Her face fell. Color drained. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was seismic. Cal, I can explain it. No need, I said calmly, standing. I've already spoken to your attorney. The divorce papers are drafted. The joint accounts? Closed. The cabin? Sold. The photos? Shared. She blinked. Shared. I leaned down, voice quiet but steady. With Simon's boss, his ex-wife, and a couple of investors who don't love funding affairs during tax season. I slid the bill across the table. Already paid. Generous tip. Enjoy the room, I said. I left your favorite perfume on the pillow. It should still smell like loyalty before it evaporates. Then I walked out. No drama. No yelling. Just a clean exit. The kind she never saw coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was hurting. I'd already burned through the heartbreak weeks ago. It was because, for the first time in months, I felt alive. And there's something electric about silence after you've dropped the last match. The morning after Le Jardin, I made coffee like I always did. 2 mugs. Hers and mine. Except hers stayed untouched. I stared at it for a second too long, steam curling into the empty chair across from me. I didn't miss her. I missed who she used to be. Before the lies, before the passwords, before she made duck for another man. By 8 a.m., my phone was already vibrating. Lydia had finally caught up. Lydia, we need to talk. Lydia, where are you? Lydia, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Lydia, don't do anything stupid. Too late. While she was sipping wine and processing the nuclear fallout of her affair going public, I was walking into a lawyer's office with a folder labeled Truth and a calm smile. Mr. Garrett, the receptionist said. That's me. Right this way. I met with a woman named Evelyn March, divorce attorney, former prosecutor, sharp as a guillotine. She wore black heels, a steel watch, and no patience for games. You brought evidence? She asked, eyes scanning me over her glasses. I handed her the folder. Dates, receipts, photos, emails. Confirmed infidelity. The works. She whistled softly as she flipped through it. Your wife really didn't think you'd catch on, huh? She underestimated me. Evelyn looked up. That's usually how this starts. And ends. We spent the next 2 hours drafting terms. I didn't want revenge in court. I wanted precision. Lydia could keep her art studio, her car, and the antique desk she loved more than our dog. But the house? Mine. The savings? Split after the clawbacks. Her lawyer called that afternoon. The tone was already different. Not arrogant, not dismissive. Careful. Mr. Garrett, I'd like to request we discuss this privately before going nuclear. I smiled. We already went nuclear. I'm just here to divvy up the ash. By dinner, Lydia was on the porch. She looked wrecked. Hair in a messy bun, sunglasses she didn't need, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for a storm that had already passed. I opened the door halfway. Cal, you've got 2 minutes. Look, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I raised an eyebrow. The affair, or the consequences? Her lip quivered. We were drifting apart. You know we were. No, I said, calm as ever. You drifted. I stayed. She took off her sunglasses. Red eyes. Mascara clinging like it didn't want to be involved. You weren't present anymore. You stopped noticing me. I noticed you had a second phone plan under your maiden name. That shut her up. She sniffed. You embarrassed me, Cal. I laughed once, dry flat. You planned a life behind my back, and you're embarrassed? Everyone saw the photos. His boss fired him. His wife kicked him out. And you think I feel bad? I stepped closer. You turned me into a placeholder while you played house with a guy who moisturizes his forearms. You don't get sympathy for that. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a choice. I just turned the lights on. She stared at the ground. I thought we were happy once. So did I. Silence stretched like a shadow between us. Please, she whispered. Let's talk about this. Privately. No more emails. No lawyers. I shook my head. You brought Simon into our marriage. I'm bringing Evelyn into our divorce. She looked up. You're really going through with it? Already filed. Tears welled in her eyes. But still, she reached out like the past was something she could touch and fix. I didn't flinch. I let her hand hover between us and drop. I won't fight you, she said quietly. You already did. She turned and walked away, shoulders heavy, heels wobbling like her whole identity had come undone. I watched her go. Didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just closed the door behind me. And let me tell you something I learned that day. There's nothing colder than the calm after the truth. Later that week, I got a message from Simon's ex-wife. Rebecca Gaines, I just want to say thank you for exposing it. I've been suspicious for months, but no proof. Until you. I replied, you deserve better. We both do. She sent back a photo, his bags on the curb, a wine glass smashed on the sidewalk. I smiled, not because I enjoy pain, but because sometimes justice looks like a Samsonite suitcase and a broken stemware dream. That weekend, I started painting the guest room. New walls, new start. My buddy James came over to help. So you're really doing it? He asked between brush strokes. Yep. You okay? I looked around at the half-finished room, the silence, the smell of fresh paint and fresh beginnings. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm free. James nodded. Damn. Yeah, I said. Damn. Monday morning, I walked into work and got a standing ovation. Okay, not literally. But there were nods. Pursed lips. A few well-timed claps of appreciation disguised as keyboard typing. Word had traveled. Quietly. Efficiently. Turns out, when your wife cheats with a man who tries to play alpha in a small town, and you dismantle both their egos without raising your voice, people notice. Cal, my boss said, leaning into my office doorway, coffee in hand. Heard you had a productive weekend. I didn't ask how he knew. Small towns don't need newspapers. They've got barbershops and wine bars. Something like that, I said. Well, he nodded. If this whole numbers thing doesn't pan out, consider consulting. You clearly know how to resolve mismanaged accounts. We both smiled, then went back to pretending like our lives were just spreadsheets and lunch breaks. But Simon? Simon wasn't having such a smooth Monday. His company issued a formal statement about breaches of ethical conduct. Apparently, his flings weren't limited to Lydia. Two other women came forward, both coworkers, both eager to explain how inspirational quotes and email signatures didn't make up for inappropriate late-night messages and accidental shoulder touches during brainstorming sessions. His board ousted him within 48 hours. Lydia tried calling again. Left a voicemail this time. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I drove to our storage unit one last time. Not for evidence. I'd already collected that. No, I went to close it. In the lease. Burn the physical receipt of her second life. Inside, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A notebook. Leather-bound. Fancy. Tucked between a scarf and a parish travel guide with Simon's handwriting in the margins. I opened it. On the first page, letters to the life I almost had. Lydia's handwriting. I read one. Then another. By the fourth, my jaw had locked. They were dated. They spanned over a year. Each one a love letter, half poem, half confession. Not to Simon. Not to me. But to some blurry fantasy of freedom. A life where she could have both comfort and thrill, routine and romance. A life where her decisions had no consequences. It wasn't about love. It was about escape. The kind you plan from the comfort of a king-sized bed bought with your husband's bonus check. I closed the book and walked out. Dropped it in the unit manager's trash on my way to the desk. Let it rot with the other things she left behind. Back at the house, I started noticing the details she used to control. The eucalyptus-scented candles. Gone. The decorative pillows arranged by seasonal mood. I threw them out. The weekly meal planner, color-coded and laminated. Into the fireplace. The house didn't feel empty. It felt reclaimed. I rearranged the furniture. Swapped rooms. Took the guest room and made it mine. Bought new sheets. White. Clean. No perfume. I called an old friend, Mara. We hadn't spoken much since the wedding. She and Lydia never clicked. Probably because Mara could see through her smile. We grabbed coffee. Caught up. Laughed a lot harder than I expected. You look lighter, she said, sipping her drink. Divorce suits me, I replied. Guess it beats wearing betrayal. There it was. That honest bluntness I hadn't heard in years. Lydia always hated it. Called it abrasive. I used to agree. No? It felt like fresh air. We walked around the lake, talked about everything except Lydia, until Mara finally said, "You know, I never trusted her." I didn't respond, not out of denial, but because I wasn't surprised anymore by how many people saw what I refused to. "She made everything look so polished," Mara said. But I swear, every time she smiled, I felt like someone was whispering a lie behind my back. I nodded. She smiled the most when she was already gone. By Friday, the paperwork came through. Finalized. Stamped. Irrevocable. 22 years together, dissolved in under 4 weeks. That's the thing no one tells you about divorce. It's not the paperwork that breaks you. It's the speed. The way something you spent decades building gets filed and processed like a refund request for defective merchandise. But it felt good. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed it. That night, I had a single drink on the back porch. Whiskey. Neat. Then, just as I was settling in for the evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it. But something told me to answer. "Cal?" The voice was soft. Familiar. Fragile. It was Rebecca, Simon's ex-wife. "Hi," I said, more curious than anything else. I didn't know who else to call," she said. "I'm sorry if this is weird." "No, not weird," I said. "Just unexpected." She laughed. "Hollow? That's the theme of the year." "Uh-huh." Turns out, Simon was spiraling. He'd been calling her, begging to come back, claiming Lydia manipulated him. Rebecca didn't fall for it. She just wanted to talk. Not about revenge. Not even about betrayal. Just about being. We stayed on the phone for an hour. Talking. Nothing romantic. Nothing heavy. Just two people breathing in the same aftermath. Before she hung up, she said, "You handled it with more grace than I ever could have." "I wasn't graceful," I replied. "Just tired." "Tired people don't usually win, Cal." "Maybe not," I said. "But they clean up well." After the call with Rebecca, I went upstairs, sat at my desk, and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. There's something surreal about catching your own eyes after the storm has passed. Like, who are you now? And how long have you been becoming him? I opened my laptop, created a new folder. Title: Foreclosure, not contact. Inside, I dropped the last of the photos, the emails, and the legal documentation. Not for leverage. Not for court. Just to remind myself it all happened. That I didn't imagine any of it. That I wasn't crazy. People say time heals. I don't agree. I think time just gives you distance from what you'll never really understand. So I built distance on purpose. I left the house we'd shared and moved into a small place near the lake. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just mine. I didn't tell Lydia. Didn't give her the address. Didn't leave a note. She found out the way she deserved, by coming home one day to a house where I no longer existed. She emailed me 2 weeks later. "I don't understand why you left without saying goodbye." I didn't reply. Because here's the truth. I had said goodbye. She just wasn't listening. One day, out of sheer curiosity, or maybe morbid indulgence, I looked Lydia up. She had a new Instagram handle. At Fresh Start Tan Coffee. Classic. Her profile picture was a latte and a ringless hand. The captions were all about rebirth and resilience. She even posted a photo of her new apartment. Smaller. Dimmer. No art on the walls. A few people commented. One read, "You're glowing, babe." I knew better. I clicked through her posts. Paris throwbacks. Gym selfies. Vague quotes about learning to choose yourself. I wondered if she understood the irony, posting about self-love while cheating with a man who got fired for having too much of it. One post had a comment from Simon. "You'll always have a piece of me." Her reply? Deleted. I closed the app. Blocked her. Not because I was angry. Because I didn't care anymore. And that's the real end of a relationship, not when you walk out. Not when the papers are signed. It's when their name shows up, and your pulse doesn't. I was halfway through organizing my bookshelves when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a familiar face, Rachel. Lydia's daughter from her first marriage. My stepdaughter, technically. But I raised her since she was 8. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hi," she said, standing there like she'd rehearsed the word. "Hey," I said. "Didn't expect to see you." She held a plastic bag. Inside, a photo album. "I found this in the attic," she said. "Thought maybe you'd want it." I took the bag gently. "Thanks." She looked around. "This place suits you." "It's quiet," I said. She hesitated. "I'm sorry." I waited. For not saying anything. I knew. About her and Simon. My jaw clenched, but not from anger. Just confirmation. She made me promise not to tell, Rachel added. Said you'd fall apart. I didn't fall, I said. I just stopped holding up a ceiling that was already cracked. She nodded. You were a better dad to me than my real one ever was. I just thought you should hear that. I thanked her. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. She left. The door closed. And still, I felt something lift. Months passed. The lake froze. Then thawed. Spring came like a whisper, not a promise. I took up woodworking. Nothing serious. Just enough to make something solid with my hands again. I made a table. Sturdy. No hidden screws. No weak corners. One day I sat at that table with a new deck of cards and an old friend, Mara. She dealt the hand like she'd done 100 times before. You ever wonder, she asked, what she tells people now? Probably that I overreacted, I said. Or that she was misunderstood. Mara smirked. Or that you were the villain. I raised my glass. Then let her write her version. I'm not in it anymore. The truth is, revenge doesn't always wear fire. Sometimes it shows up as indifference. As peace. The best revenge I ever took was rebuilding a life she couldn't follow me into. No apologies. No explanations. Just a new life. One without her name on the lease.